actually wasn't expecting to be speaking here. I thought I would be speaking in the gallery. There's quite an excellent crowd here. It's only happened in 2 times over 20 years of guest lecturing and teaching in schools, colleges, prisons, a whole variety of places where I've talked without a visual to go with. So I'm going to kind of try to ad-lib it and wing it here. I'd also like to thank Jonathan, the previous speaker. I have the utmost respect and admiration for journalists and photojournalists who risk and frequently lose their lives worldwide covering conflicts. Thank you, Jonathan. Just in the way of a brief background as to who I am and why I do all the Holocaust and contemporary human rights art that I do. I was born in 1950, 5 years after World War II ended, in the shadow of World War II and the Holocaust. I grew up came of age in the mid to late 60s in high school. John Kennedy was assassinated when I was 13. Malcolm X, I think when I was 16. Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King when I was 18. I was a runaway myself to Haight-Ashbury at age 18. And things were not easy in those years. Some friends of mine died. People got into drugs, Vietnam, and all that. Eventually I moved to Illinois at age 22. And I also speak reverently of community colleges because I did my freshman year of college at a community college in central Illinois. And I became an art major just at my first few classes. I did my first social justice artwork, a linoleum block print based on a photo I had seen of a Vietnamese woman with like a pistol or a revolver pressing up against her head. I don't remember the photo or where I saw it. I didn't save it. There's a more famous photo that was published and seen worldwide on TV. This is decades before the internet, of a South Vietnamese, a suspected Viet Cong who was standing on a street in Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, and it was very powerful, affected a lot of Americans. The chief of police in Saigon held a pistol up to his head and then blew him away. Anyway, so social justice art kind of began for me really early. And I did an occasional social justice themed artwork. In college, I transferred to a state university as a sophomore in Illinois. I went to grad school in Missouri. Someone, I assume a student, left a photograph of a severed boar's head, like a pig's head, in my flat file in the printmaking room where I studied art in grad school. It was interesting. Nowadays, if something like that were to happen to a student, let's say like an anti-black or anti-Vietnamese or anti-Catholic or anti-Semitic type of thing, you know, and it got in the press, it could cause a whole imbroglio. I just kind of shrugged it off. I thought, okay, someone doesn't like me. I'm a Jew. Well, I just continued on with my work, which is my focus. I moved to Seattle out of graduate school and supported myself for 29 years working a job as a library clerk for Seattle Public Library. Artists have to work at some job or another in 99% of the cases, and then they may become really well off when they're elderly or when you're gone. That's the way it works. So in 1984, when I was 34, I had the opportunity to go to Europe for the first time, specifically to Poland. In Poland, I've described as the world's largest Jewish graveyard. But it's a graveyard that's not a graveyard because millions of people were gassed and they became like ashes and smoke. And I began doing artistic responses to the Holocaust, both during that first summer in Poland and then immediately after I came back. And I went back to Poland again the following summer, 1985. 6 years later, I began the series that basically overtook my life, of which one work from that series you'll see in the gallery next door, called Multiple Amputee Awaiting Deportation, Lodz or Łódź in Polish, Poland. I'm going to just continue just a quick synopsis from it, and I'll talk about those two works. And I hope everyone will go see them during the course of the exhibit. And 6 years after my second trip to Poland, in late '91, I began a drawing from a book I got from the library of photographs taken in the Warsaw Ghetto, which was itself like a concentration and death camp. About 500,000 people were murdered in and out of the ghetto, half in the ghetto and others at one of the Nazi death camps. And then I began a second drawing a few months later, like January 1992, and I originally called the series Under the Wings of God, which was the title for all these years until last April, when I decided to ask God for my Holocaust art series. It's now something called Under the Wings. I've seen quotes from Holocaust survivors who said God was on vacation. God was on holiday when he came to camps like, death camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka and so on. I began guest teaching in 1994, invited a man standing over there, who's videoing this, named Brooke Rolston, a now retired campus minister at the University of Washington, who I had met at Hillel, the Jewish Student Center of the UW, when Art Spiegelman, the author of the Mouse books, anybody familiar with these? M-A-U-S? You can find these at the library. He's a peer of mine, also grew up in Queens, New York. His parents were Holocaust survivors, and he did these Mouse 1 and Mouse 2. They call graphic novels now. It's kind of like comic strip books for adults, in which he chronicled the story of his father's odyssey in Poland as a Polish Jew in concentration and death camps and all that. So I met Brooke Rolston, and he's followed the course of my career all these years. Also brought me out here today. Thank you, Brooke. I don't remember how I got into that tangent. But, so I gave my very first lecture in 1994 at the Christian Student Center, where he was director of. And over the years, I've done a lot of interfaith dialogue with people of many different backgrounds. Brooke has accompanied me to some of them, including in prisons in Monroe and elsewhere. In the course of lecturing into the late 1990s, I was realizing that the Holocaust in World War II was ancient history. So I began thinking about doing a companion art series. And in 2003, I began that series called Sightseeing with Dignity. There are now 19 works done in that series, one of which you'll see in the gallery next door. Chico Mendes was born in 1944, a Brazilian Amazonian rainforest defender, indigenous peoples, like rights defender and so on. He was shot to death by a rancher in 1988 at age 44, leaving a wife and family as his survivors. The Under the Wings series now has 62 works, mainly portraying Jewish victims of the Nazis, but also at least 2 Christians, one Romani, aka Gypsy, and that series I think of as a kind of until Art Spiegelman and the Mouse books came along, Holocaust Education in the United States kind of solely revolved around Anne Frank, and Anne Frank. And Art Spiegelman revolutionized that. And, sorry, I missed my train of thought. I'm going to jump back to the mosaic drawing combo, the multiple amputee. I had seen this photograph on the internet a few years ago of an unnamed victim of the Nazis. She was seated outdoors on a chair, and it was captioned, this woman like awaiting deportation to the Nazi death camp in Chelmno. It was a city in Poland, a town where one of the death camps was. She surely had no idea what awaited her. And And she had 2 strikes against her, capital punishment-wise, and under the laws of the Third Reich. She was a multiple amputee, and she was a Jew, which made her targeted for death. Jews, Romani and Sinti, Gypsies were targeted for death throughout Europe. The multiple amputee part is important. And I mention this especially like when I go to schools and I'm talking with presentations with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. The reason the Holocaust happened and why genocides continue today, well, not why genocides continue today, but why they're not stopped when they could be, is because there are too many people in too many countries and too many government leaders who are silent. I don't know how many have died in Syria the last 2 or 3 years, probably at least a few 100,000 now. In the Congo, I think 5 million people have died over the past 10 to 15 years. And the world knows about this, but who does what? I heard Jonathan, the previous speaker, mentioned some things aren't changing at all. And before the Nazis began what they called the final solution to the Jewish problem, they systematically murdered 250,000 Protestant and Catholic, physically and mentally disabled people who were in institutions. Now, this took the work of thousands of people to do. Police, lawyers, clergy, nurses, truck drivers, in these mobile killing trucks where they were gassed to death. And had people spoken out forcefully in Germany and Austria, which is where those victims were from, and brought that to the world's attention, it's entirely impossible that the Holocaust that followed would not have happened. The Holocaust did not have to happen. 5 million dead in the Congo the last 15 years did not have to happen, and so on. So the most important lesson I feel I can offer to audiences: don't be silent, and speak out when you hear of injustice. It could be in your neighborhood. It could be in your city, region, state, country, or it could be 10,000 miles away. But Elie Wiesel, the world's most famous living Holocaust survivor, Nobel Peace Prize winner, has stated that he fears apathy more than those he may very strongly disagree with, because apathy allows genocide. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Akiva and Jonathan. Thank you both. And as you can see and hear and see in the show next door, artists are vehicles for social justice and for experiences that many of us aren't aware of. And so the visual arts, creativity is a vehicle for change, can be. And